Thank you, everyone. How's everybody doing today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good.
Well, we have one person out of fucking four that answered, so that's always a good start. Okay,
I would like to say on behalf of the rest of the stream, we're all deceased.
There are some people that were supposed to be on where computers and microphones died. We are sorry for this interruption. There was
Please
some
press
technical
F.
issues. There was just a little bit of technical issues.
I'm hoping for the interpretive dance, but you know, is what it is.
Yeah, nobody's interpreting any sort of form of dancing. It's not happening.
Oh, I was really hoping for somebody to sit on somebody else's lap.
It's not fucking happening.
Beautiful.
It's not happening. I don't know what everybody's trying to talk about. I have no idea. All right, well, now we've got that conspiracy out of the way, let's actually talk about a conspiracy that we're actually going to be talking about today, which is the idea of ancient aliens. So everybody's obviously already heard and seen the meme before. I'm not saying it's alien, but aliens. That's basically where the idea of ancient aliens actually comes from. It's from him. He believes that any sort of form of civilization was inherently born from ancient aliens. From the Aztecs to the Egyptians to Chinese burial, you have forms of pyramids all over the earth. You could even go to the point of people saying that some people believe Atlantis is actually an alien spacecraft that landed and then took off again. It all depends on people's perceptions of what's going on. Me, myself, I would just like to take this premise and take this opportunity to say the views that are expressed in this are the views of a thought experiment. Just because we go down a rabbit hole does not necessarily that we believe in what we're talking about. This is a thought experiment. We're going through the ideas of what other people go through. That being said, who wants to kick us off with any sort of theories or any sort of ideas, or should I carry on?
You go for it. You're the host.
That's always helpful. So always helpful. Yeah, first of all, as Dancer Quinn's actually already said, to any sort of American viewers that are on at the moment, happy fucking Traitors Day. Bastard Yanks. Celebrate your freedom like no tomorrow, because you could be like the UK and have fucking none of it.
All right. Well, happy 4th of July. I'm loving every second of my freedom.
Yeah, happy Independence Day, all you bloody Yanks.
See, when anybody ever says Happy Independence Day, all I can see is Will Smith with a cigar in his mouth, walking through a desert with a fucking parachute behind him, going, "You don't want to look in that, he stinks."
Actually, Independence Day 1 was good. Independence Day 2, yeah, not so impressed.
Yeah, the sequels never seem to be anywhere near the same as the originals do there, to be fair. But
that movie was an abomination and should have never been made.
Possible. Possible. So what does anybody actually feel? Does anybody actually think that there could be a process or an idea of maybe the reasons why we can't find a missing link, for instance, and the ideas of evolution is because we were actually made autonomously, we were made by something else, and no, not a god, but maybe an alien creator?
Thing is, that actually does make a damn sight more sense than a lot of the theories that are out there. Just look at the coincidences that there are all around the world. We have civilization.
The coincidences. I love that. It was such a good pun.
Thank you. The point is you've got all these civilizations all around the world with very similar architecture that actually has had no bloody connection for thousands of years, but yet, like you said, with the pyramids, I mean, Egypt is well known for its pyramids, but then again, you go to the Middle America and like Mexico area, and you just look at the ziggurats they've got. At the end of the day, they're just pyramids without a tip. In Asia, they've got their own version of ziggurats. So, how the hell does all this architecture get built all around the world so very bloody similar without it being passed around by an unknown entity. Note, I'm not defining what type.
Well, I've got something that's even more interesting, which is really good and really good on what you said as well. But to keep that in mind, how is it that most civilizations that use the identification of mummification, why did they have or have traces of cocaine in the mummification processes? And that includes in Egypt, and that also includes in areas of Russia, that also includes area of China and Japan as well, as far afield as that. And obviously there's only one place that actually produces cocaine. So
True.
why has it been able to be transferred across? Was Silk Road international, intercontinental?
Good bloody question, mate. And it does make. I mean, I know we're basically joking about the whole ancient alien thing, but it has to be said. Are we joking? Is this not actually a distinct possibility? That's the scary thing. Now, granted, the
Why?
guy's obviously insane, but he does
I don't
open
know.
possibilities.
I don't know if it's insane, because if you actually look at some sort of the evidence, for instance, if you look at the religions of these type of areas that have set, for say, for instance, what you said with the Aztecs, the Egyptians, and in China, they have multiple deities. The same as in Hinduism. Hinduism and in India, they also build forms of pyramids and temples similar to the pyramids and other sections. And they all believe and all have the same sort of ideas that they have multiple deities because they believe in different gods, have different powers. The same as the Greeks, the same as the Romans, the same as Norse mythology. Why is there so many deities for different areas? And why is all the deities very, very similar in what they actually portray? I know some people go, oh, yeah, we got thunder, so people are going to assume there's a thunder god. But why is it like that for every civilization that's similar in the aspects of mummification and the ideas of civilization, including Sumerians?
I would like to come back on that one. I don't have an answer to the remarkable drug dealing, but with regards to the similarities between all these cultures, my opinion of the whole thing, because usually we start with our real opinion and then we, as you like to say, just go off down the rabbit hole for fun. So my real opinion is that all these things happened around the same time for these different cultures. Like they'd been around for a certain amount of time and then they did these things because of human psychology. They got to the pyramid stage, and then if they advanced beyond that, they started building towers, and then if they advanced beyond that, they started building, city. You know what I mean? Like the longer they survive, the more similar they become to us, as in modern us, and the older they are, the more similarities they have between them. And I think that's because of just human psychology, and there's a bit of evidence to support that as well, particularly regarding the pyramid thing. It's humans have always tried to sort of create abstract knowledge using shapes first, and then shapes and images first, and then language second. And so, if you think, in terms of mountains, and then we build a mountain, and then we build something that is high but is no longer related to nature, so we get rid of the pyramid part, and it's more like a tower. As for the lightning god, that's like lightning is probably the most unnatural thing that humans have ever seen in the natural world. Like, it's so rare and so just uncanny. You wouldn't see anything like that. So I think that would make an impression on pretty much anyone. Like I think thunder's incredible, even as a modern person. So that's my opinion on it.
And could I just add on what Mr. Quinn said earlier about is it just being insane? Before the Wright brothers, if you told humans they were fly, they would have thought that is insane. Is it just something we don't understand fully yet and haven't got our minds wrapped around?
That's quite feasible, mate. I have to agree with you. I mean, let's be honest. At one point, it was completely ridiculous the thought of a human being able to go more than 30 miles an hour. He'd just die at that. That was something that was truly and devoutly believed by people. Nowadays, 30 miles an hour is barely a speed limit that people register.
No, I would have to actually agree with most of that. I do think it was maybe what people would say context of time, for instance, or just as somebody like David Icke would say, the idea of a collective evolution. And I don't mean collective evolution at the same time, I mean in conscious evolution. But everybody at the same time was having similar to the same ideas. Maybe that's something that could happen. I just think that it's kind of interesting that mostly on the Southern Hemisphere, that most of the people in the Southern Hemisphere had similar, if not the same beliefs. Not all of them, obviously, I understand that, but most.
It shows you how much they grasped logic, though, and they didn't know they grasped it, because I found out recently that basically if we take God's aliens out of the equation, the only phenomenon that we know of that could create life out of pretty much nothing is a bolt of lightning hitting the ocean, because that would create enough amino acids to form proteins and then life. And that's quite amazing if you think about it, that they view the lightning as the source of all the life on Earth, and that was deemed to be the Earth meets the heaven through the bolt of lightning, and so the God and the Earth make a life form. And it's like, holy shit, this was like, what, 50,000, 100,000 years ago they were thinking this stuff up? It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you've got to remember that they weren't looking at the world in the same way that we do. They didn't have what we, they may have been looking at it through a childlike innocence, and therefore may have understood things in a different way to us, maybe something we can't.
Yeah,
well,
that's true.
Well, the ancient Sumerians actually believed that the Anunnaki were their gods, and they were a group of beings that came from, for lack of a better term, outer space, that came here and created humans as a slave race. At least that's one way they've read the ancient text. So, I mean, there is something to the idea that maybe the religion origin stories really came from, visitors from another world, and they actually saw these people leave and go back to the heavens, via some sort of craft.
By the way, people are absolutely surprised by who that voice was. That was Mad Dog Productions, and welcome very much, sir, and good to have you on.
Yeah, thanks. My son didn't want to go to the coast, so I stayed home. I just found out why he didn't want to go. His little girlfriend next door, they're going to a fireworks show. He wants to go with them. So I'm home alone all day now. Little 13-year-olds and their tricks.
Oh dear.
I'm glad my kids aren't old enough to have boyfriends.
They will do eventually. They will do eventually, unfortunately, for everyone.
I'm worried that my son is old enough to have a boyfriend. Oh, homophobia.
Oh dear.
Oh dear, we can't have any of that on here.
My kids are very young, and I shelter them. So no, never. They're never allowed to date ever.
Yeah, my daughter's going to be a nun, even though I'm not religious at all. I'm just going to drop her off at the nunnery. But no, I totally got you guys sidetracked. Sorry, common sense. I do have a question though, Quinn. Have you heard the idea of life actually starting from an asteroid hitting the Earth with the remnants of humanity?
That's very well known, that one. I'm actually perfectly comfortable with that as a way that we was here. At the end of the day, I've said it before, I'll say it again, humanity is a virus. We are an interspatial virus just that got spread to this poor little planet.
Well, wouldn't that be ancient aliens even in itself? Because that means there was another colony of humanity somewhere, and that's how we got transplanted.
Well, maybe not a colony of humanity, because that's too specific, but definitely a different colony of carbon-based life forms. That's a definite, because otherwise how else would the life form evolved on the asteroid in itself, of being able to give the amino acids to start off with? So there's definitely another form of carbon-based life forms out there, otherwise we wouldn't have started. So I completely agree with that premise.
Or it could simply be just two elements that exist in different places in the world, not necessarily a life form that only combined on Earth that started it.
It could be, but the actual theory in itself was that there was actually life already on the asteroid that hit, and with the life that actually hit, because obviously you've heard of particular amoebas and things like that can actually withstand nuclear explosions. So, in fact, obviously, there's cockroaches that can actually can survive nuclear explosions. There's actually forms of life that can actually live through going through space. They hibernate, but they actually can live while going through space.
Yeah,
you're talking about the
tardigrades.
Yeah, there's lots of things that are out there that we don't really consider that well, and they are all considered forms of alien life. For instance, if there was something that we consider to be normal on our planet, but was made on Titan, for instance, one of the moons on Jupiter, then that would be classified as alien life. And say, for instance, we did come from Mars in the beginning, and some people say that we transferred over or whatever. It's a case of, wouldn't that necessarily be that we are actually aliens and we're not actually native of this planet?
Yes, that's
I've always believed that.
Sorry, dude, go on.
Sorry, okay. No, I was just saying I've always believed that it is some kind of asteroid or something hit this planet, maybe hit the moon first, remnants come off and hit this planet, and that's where we came from, being the non-religious type.
I've never believed that one at all. There's varying reasons, but I just think it's too complicated when the answer, there is the potential answer that we originated on Earth seems the simplest one. And if the materials were all there, which we know they were, like, I'm not dismissing you guys' theory. I'm just saying that theory has never really, when you hear something and you're just like, aha, yes, well, that theory's never done it for me. And I'm not entirely sure if it's all rational, but I just think I hear people explain it through. I'm like, there's too many steps in this process. It seems really convoluted. Whereas if you think of like how we are just perfectly situated in the solar system versus other planets, and that's why they can't maintain life. It's like, well, maybe it's more to do with where the planet is than anything being put on it.
Actually,
that's actually a good point. Sorry, yeah, that's actually a very good point, because what we're doing again is we're talking about humans only and how we explain them. But look at all the other species on the planet. Did the aliens put them there, or was that again just developed on Earth?
Exactly, because the DNA has pretty much every single thing on Earth can be traced back to a form of yeast, and that yeast could have grown in the ocean from extreme heat and pressure, which would be caused potentially by lightning.
How did the ocean get there, though?
What do you mean?
How did the ocean get there? I know how the ocean got there, but how did the ocean get there?
Do you mean, do I think it was God, or do you mean like
No, of course not. I mean, how was the ocean when the place was a hotbed of molten rock and molten lava? How did that generate to be able to form any sort of form of H2O and water?
Just with the cooling of the solar system gradually, and if you think of all that heat and all that pressure, it's like the way I think of the universe is like a series of dice rolls, and like the hotter something is and the more pressure there is, the more dice rolls you get, so the more chances there are that something will happen. So if you look at like Pluto, that's got like maybe 2 dice rolls, versus that volcanic Earth you talk about has like thousands and thousands of dice rolls for something to happen, because the conditions are just better.
Yeah, well, what I was thinking when you guys were talking about that is they say that the dinosaurs were wiped out because of a giant asteroid, and the rise of humanity came after the dinosaurs were wiped out. So what if there was already life forming here, and then this rock carrying, for lack of a better term, the human virus on it is what wiped out the dinosaurs and seeded humanity? That would explain both.
And another way to look at it.
Another way to look at it. Sorry, I just wanted to come back to the point of the actual Earth when it first started was just molten rock and molten lava. There was, apart from obviously having gold and a couple of bits of the periodic table was in the elements, there wasn't amino acids, there wasn't plants, there wasn't water, there wasn't even H2O on the Earth. So for everything else that was to come onto the Earth, how did it get here in the first place?
Well, it had 4 billion years before anything actually happened.
And our planets as each individually a position in time. So this is the Earth as it is today. And if you go out to Mercury, if the Earth was left to its own devices, and sorry, if you go out to Mars, that would be the next stage of our planet. And then over a period of long time, if you go from Mars out to Jupiter to Saturn, they are just stages in time of what our may become. So
it's a possibility, but the thing that happened with Mars is that its iron content is not sufficient enough to be able to form an ozone layer or a magnetosphere to be able to stop the solar winds from taking away its atmosphere. So the reason why Mars is the way that Mars is, a red dying planet, is because its magnetosphere is so weak that it can only just about hold an atmosphere to generate some sort of weather system. That's about it.
Yeah.
Before that, though, it was strong enough to generate a proper magnetosphere and actually harbour some form of life. Hence why it has an ice cap. Hence why it also has so much sand on it, because sand actually comes from the degeneration of carbon-based forms, not necessarily physical humanoid life or even animal life, but plant life at least.
Yeah.
The reason
that's a good, like the sand. There's a good illustration of how mutable things are, because you know we're discussing how does molten iron effectively turn into a rainforest, and it's like, well, if you've ever watched glass being made, like look how you get sand, and through heat and moving it around, you get glass, and if you watch it occur, it's really quite an amazing process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all the same thing, and we had 4 billion years of absolutely nothing happening, and then it all ramped up relatively quickly after, and it actually fits in with a Pareto distribution of, you know, so long of like zero happening, and then we get the dinosaurs, which are pretty crazy, and then within 250 million years you've got us with iPhones,
you know that
and fridges and stuff.
You know that there was almost close to I'm going to get my bloody dates mixed up. It's either 500 million or 5 billion years between the dinosaurs and the first forms of life on Earth, don't you?
Yeah, it's is it now? Is this the right way of saying it? That it's shorter a period between us and the dinosaurs than there was between the dinosaurs and zero.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So that fits in kind of with the way nature and science already behave, you know. And that's my take on it anyway. I would like to just say with the aliens topic more generally, I've noticed that with the way people talk about aliens and extraterrestrials and stuff, it seems to have replaced the way people used to talk about dragons and sea monsters. It's almost exactly the same types of psychological kind of reactions we have to them, and even the thing of like, if you look at most people's rendition of an alien, it's actually a composite of yucky things that humans don't like all put together. Because I'd always thought, if an alien really visited Earth, like, why wouldn't it be a gas? Why wouldn't it be like a gas that can think? But they always look like us in some way, but twisted, you know. I find that interesting.
It's because humanity automatically wants to anthropomorphize things. Ooh, I said the word right.
Correct, and also we believe that the only forms of life that could generate any sort of other humanoid is a carbon-based life form rather than a silicon-based life form.
Which in itself,
that's also another.
I mean, sorry, not hypocritical. It's quite arrogant. I mean, why should we think that humanity is the correct shape for a life form? That's
it's not humanity. It's not humanity. I didn't mean carbon-based to be the forms of humanity. Carbon-based means plants. It also means fish and things like that in the sea. Carbon-based just means what the base of the animal or thing is. Silicon-based is to do with metallized and stuff like that, and plasticized.
Now, did they not discover it was either silicon or selenium-based life, potentially? Because I joked about that with somebody, and then they found out it was... Because I said they're always looking for water and carbon, and I was like, well, who are they to tell life how to behave? Like, there's a load of other elements that are conductive and liquid at the same time, you know, that could make life, and then they went and found a planet that had potential life on it, and it's silicon-based or something.
Yeah, they always assume life breathes oxygen. Now, if you evolve in an environment, you're going to breathe what's there, regardless of whether it's oxygen or nitrogen or whatever it is. Sulfuric acid.
Yep.
Well, there's fish. There's fish at the bottom of volcanoes that form themselves on volcanic volcanic, I'll get there, volcanic spouts that are in the water that can actually breathe in the extremely high temperatures and the sodium that's also in the water as well. They can also breathe that in. There's also very, very small things that are on stalagmites. I can't remember what they're called, but they're very, very small, and they can actually breathe in carbon dioxide. So there's lots of things even on our planet that could actually be classified as alien. There's also something that embeds itself in ice that actually doesn't even need air to survive, and just uses the water to walk around in the ice.
You've got to wonder as well what's buried in the earth and under the sea, and under the sea and the earth that we don't know about, because you know that element francium.
Take it from me.
There's that element francium that if it's exposed to oxygen, it just explodes, and it's like, well, how many other life forms or substances are there like that? That you know, if we dug it up, it would just go pop, and we'd never hear of it again.
Yeah, correct.
Whole cities down there.
Exactly. No, that's absolutely correct. So we've only explored 5% of the ocean. 5%. That's it. That's all we've actually discovered and actually explored. We only know 5% of the ocean. That means we don't know every single fish that's in the sea. Those are only species that are either close to the top or where we've been when we've gone down. But we don't know every species that's in the sea. We don't even know every species that's in Earth or on Earth in itself. We're still discovering new species every single day. But when I said that, do you know where the water come from? The reason why I suggested that was because water has actually been proven to come from ice asteroids that have collided with the Earth. That's where we are assuming to get our water from, and where we got H2O from. And after the ice asteroids hit the Earth, we went into an ice age as well, which then produced more ice around the Earth to give us more water. Venus didn't go through that process, and that's why they produced more and more volcanoes, and the surface temperature increased and caused a greenhouse effect.
See, that makes a lot of sense, because you see a lot of planets that have processes going on in them, but they're either too volatile or not volatile enough, and then you've got us. And that's what I mean about the dice rolls, is if you look throughout the universe, they've not found any really habitable planets, and certainly the ones they've found don't have any settlements on them or anything, as far as
they don't have any settlements on them, but they are finding a hell of a lot of Earth-like planets. If you type in Earth-like planets, there's at least around about 12 that we know that could sustain life as we know it on them, including one planet that's 10 times the size of Earth that has Earth-like atmosphere.
Yeah, but I just mean, like, if you look at all, like I said about the probability aspect, like there will be something missing from all of those, like not enough shielding from their sun, or it's too big and the gravity is too powerful. Like there's always something, and we've got this.
No. The reason why I said that, the reason why I said that there was 12 planets that can sustain human life, I mean they are exactly the right inhabitants or the right conditions for human life to sustain.
Okay, but that still fits though, because then you look at it, and then that gives you a 1 in 12. That tells you you had a 1 in 12 chance out of all the universe. There was a 1 in 12 chance, which isn't really that high.
Or 12 in a billion chance, you mean, more like?
Yeah, sorry, that's a better way of putting it. And then of that 12, a 1 in 12 chance of life. And I mean, like, that shows you how long the odds are that we were even here in the first place, which is why I don't think there's a design to it. I think if there was a design to it, there would be more life, in my opinion.
Well, the thing is, you guys were talking about how we always seem to make aliens look like ourselves. Well, that's not necessarily true if you look at these cave paintings and stuff. And some of the Native Americans had what they called the ant people. There was a great catastrophe, and the ant people took them underneath the ground and helped them, and then brought them back out. That was how one of the stages of life ended. They believe that the world has gone through 7 substantial changes, and that's how we survived at least one of them. So, I mean, we don't necessarily put ourselves onto everything. And if they're actually drawing these pictures of these aliens on the caves and stuff, is that just their fiction novels, or do you think they drew what they saw?
Well, my opinion on that is the opposite. Jensen was saying we anthropomorphize, and I think we do in fiction, but in regards to like when people really think they've seen something, or they're trying to take the fiction and make it very authentic, all the aliens are either very dragon-like or very insect-like. Unless it's Star Trek and they're people with silly makeup on. But like, for example, the Crisis series of computer games, they based all their aliens, which look completely unique, but they based them all on cephalopods from the sea. Because that's the thing, is like it's replaced the dragon. It's like the unknown thing that's a predator. Well, from the unknown. Well, space is about as unknown as it gets now, because we think we've mastered the sea and the earth. So now our fears look a little bit more up from space, but the stuff that comes down from space to terrorize us looks like stuff humans have evolved to be scared of, which is why I go back to the gas thing. Like, in my opinion, and I'm sure Jensen would like to jump on this part, in my opinion, that if we had been visited by aliens or something like that, it's highly probable we might not even be able to perceive them as objects, because they would be so unlike stuff we've been able to see before.
And more the point, they might not register us as worthwhile even speaking to. They literally may just see us as animals on the planet, the same way as we would see ants. Because after all, ants have a full civilization. To these aliens, I mean, let's be honest, people are going to sit there and say, yes, but we've got nuclear this, we've got energy this, we've got all these things. To a gas creature, that might not be anything that it registers as important enough to class us as a sentient being. Mm-hmm. That may well be why they're not communicating with us, because, well, they look at us as overexcited insects.
Yeah, I've just dropped inside chat because we're talking about varying species and that. I don't know if anyone knows the Drake equation. It's basically a sort of a mathematical equation that takes the amount of stars and the amount of galaxies, and it says, well, if there's 1 billion galaxies and only 10% of them have stars that can have life, and only 10% of those stars that have life can, exist, and so on, and it says something ridiculous. I can't remember, but it's like, if you do this equation, considering the size of the universe, there's got to be at least another 1,000 species out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to. We can come back to this anyway, because I do understand where you're going with the idea that there is so many planets out there, regardless of whether it's life that looks like us at all. Anyway, where there must be some form of other life out there. So there mathematically needs to be.
I've always thought, just mathematically, there has to be another life, but then you've got to put it over time as well, because the universe, depending what way you look at it, is roughly 13 billion years. So 500 million years ago, there could have been a life that evolved to a more advanced stage than us and then died off, because it's not just here and now, it's time as well. Maybe nothing's alive at this moment.
There's the other aspect of categorizing life, because if you look at the dinosaurs, if Earth hadn't been so hot at the time, the dinosaurs wouldn't have got as big. And if the dinosaurs hadn't got as big, they wouldn't have dominated so much of the planet. And then if they hadn't died, mammals wouldn't be a thing. But mammals only evolved because of the dinosaurs. And so it's not just about the amount of stars and suns. It's about all the probability and odds of creatures interacting with each other as well. Like imagine we were like moths and we wanted to jump into fire rather than master it. We would.
No, of course, but I don't think that's what Moz is actually trying to even suggest. Moz is only literally trying to suggest that whatever you equate as life, whether it would be a plant or whatever, with the amount of plants, with the amount of planets that are out there in the immense space that is the universe in itself, then it's a case of there must be, considering there's so many universes as well, surely there should be a percentage of life that we would be able to at some point find, or would have found us. I just would like to propose a different question, because everybody's saying that we always put the aliens in our own perspective. But what if it was the aliens that made us in their perspective, and we're only remembering what we remember of them? And that's the reason why we anamorphosize.
That's fine.
Good point.
No? Nobody wants to take that one off?
Yeah, it's something to think about, actually. Good point, yeah.
Well, the reason why I suggest that is because if you look at, as I said before, the Aztecs, if you have a look at Egyptian religion, if you have a look at Hinduism, for instance, which is a massive one, the Hindus actually say that the gods come down and they actually genetically splice different animals together. Now, to me, that doesn't necessarily seem like that would be a form of what God would do. God wouldn't do experiments so other people could see, would he? If you believed in that idea of God, that's a mammal or an animalistic point where you would do experiments to see what the cognitive response would be. That wouldn't be a godly or an entity aspect, would it? So why would gods do that as an experiment if that was even considered to be true? And how would they see that as an experiment and write that down as they have done in many, many temples? And then you have things similar with the Egyptian gods that have different animals as heads and human bodies.
I think also we're looking at the whole idea from a perspective of aliens have created us, or they purposefully create us, whereas maybe it was just Crash 1.0. Maybe this was just the planet they landed on. Just, hey, can I eat this? Can I not?
Is he robot or anyone else?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, Moz, but I understand your...
Can I splice this together?
I understand your point, what you're trying to say. You're trying to suggest that...
in its purposeful relation,
Yeah, Moz, I can't hear you, my friend. You're completely not breaking up. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that your premise is that instead of the case of the aliens having an almighty hand towards us, it's a case of maybe it was a necessity for them to, because they crashed on our planet, to create us, to make us forms of slaves. Which, if you actually have a look at, I think it's the Sumerians, where they were actually told by their gods, their god king, for instance, to get lots of gold, for instance, so they could fit into a ship or something. I think that's fucking interesting. The fact that most forms of religion that have that side have the forms of gold mines, or have the idea of going off to mining and slavery.
Well, can I come sort of add to that before?
Go for it, man.
The thing is, we're kind of looking back on these cultures with a modern sensibility. It's kind of like when you try and remember back to your childhood and then you misremember something because you're trying to think about it too much, if that makes sense, because you're trying to rationalize it. And like with a lot of these things, so for example, the stuff about the Indians and the Egyptians with they cut off their head and replaced it with a bull's and all that sort of stuff. Well, one of the explanations for that was back then these animals meant different things. Like, so the way we still use, he's as strong as an ox or as stubborn as a mule. Well, they just thought that that's how they described things much more literally, because they hadn't developed as much as we have. Like, they were smart, but they had a lot of growing up to do. So they would give the god a bull's head to show that it was a fertility god, for instance. And then so the trying all these weird things was a very human thing to do. So the gods did reflect the humans of the time, but they don't now, because we are used to Christian or Abrahamic gods, which is the Godhead and is very transcendent and sophisticated and singular. Whereas back then that really wasn't the case, and that's taken hundreds of thousands of years to get that level of sophistication.
Well, what about the Greeks and the Romans and the Norse mythology then, which is not as old as Egyptian, I'll grant you that, but it's very, very close. And they all depict their gods as humanoids.
I would point out that Zeus was rather well known for changing his shape into random animals while ravishing women. I should make that.
Yeah, no, he was a shapeshifter, yes, but he was depicted as a human, as in his normal form.
But that was a late development. If you look at like what survives in South America and Africa and stuff, when we were much more, well, let's say animalistic, the gods were much more animalistic. It wasn't until quite late on that we started to go, well, what if the gods looked like humanoids? That was really late on, and then what people started to do is refer to countries as bodies. That's why Egypt has a head and I can't remember what they call the other part. I think they say that, the upper and the lower kingdom. It's for that reason, because Egypt was considered a body. That was really late on, because the Egyptians were like 3000 BC, but there was 100,000 BC worth of thinking to be done to lead it up to that point.
What about Hinduism then? Because that's almost as old as the Egyptian religion. In fact, it's the oldest modern day religion to this day.
Yeah, well, I consider them both new, though. That's what I'm saying. I consider them both new religions in reference to how old humanity is. They're just the first ones to write shit down.
I don't know if it was Hinduism or not, but the Mahabharata, their holy text, they were talking about people on flying carpets doing a war in the skies between the gods, and that sounds like aliens. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree with that. That's where I was going with the genetic slicing. They actually say that they were in the Hindu text. They were actually saying that they were purposely putting different animals together to see if they would be able to fit. They were doing it for fun. As I said before, that's not what you would do if you were a god, because you would know the outcome. You would only do that if you didn't have an omniscience about you.
Well, absolutely. And then also you look at, because you brought up, the Greeks. Well, didn't they have the Minotaurs and stuff like that they believed in? That sounds like genetic splicing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's be honest. If we're going to talk about the Greeks, you have to look at the chimera. I mean, lion, snake, goat, and scorpion, and bat wings, just to really sort of, make it a little bit more exciting. It does definitely seem like some sort of gene splicing, doesn't it?
But what about the idea of cyclopses and giants in themselves? Isn't that a form of genetic slicing if you even have the idea of believing in that?
Well, yeah, actually, and if you think about the Greek mythology, because I really enjoy Greek mythology, the gods that you're talking about, the Olympians, were not the original gods. It was the Titans that were the original gods, and they were less human-like, and the human-like gods overthrew them. That could be a creation story of how humanity got rid of the oppressor, and the aliens left. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Mad Dodge is right on kind of what I was trying to articulate. You had the Titans, which were they were made of tornadoes and stone and scales.
They were elements, basically. They were
very elemental, or at the very least what we would consider, I guess, dragon-like. And then as their culture became more sophisticated, they realized, because this is the thing, religion is almost like mass therapy. So people are trying to work out these ideas of, good and bad, and how to survive in the wild, and how to make a city work without everybody killing each other and stuff. And so, what I would say is a comparable thing now is the way we have robots in fiction. We've gotten to such a level of sophistication now that the stuff that I'm not going to say worship, but the stuff that we think comes down from on a high to rule over us and enslave us and potentially destroy us, and we must either appease or hide from or whatever, is Skynet or aliens. You know what I mean? Because our consciousness as a planet is still moving forward, and these guys were the forerunners to that, but the only language they had was ant people and bullmen,
Well,
it's almost as if on an intellectual level we have to make up something that we can't understand.
Yeah, it's like I think that humans get along a lot better when you're presented with an idea and then you say it's like something that it's not like, but it's a metaphor or a simile, which gives you a better idea of what it's not, and then
we can accept it easier.
Yeah, and then you've got enough. If you do that enough times, you've got a load of it's like jigsaw pieces. You've got to make the pieces around it if you can't find the piece on its own.
Yeah.
And then once you've done that enough times, you've got a rough idea of what you're missing. And I think that humans have always kind of done that. So we started on the outer edges with probably plant and rock gods, and gods made of just light, and then animals, and then moving further and further in. And now we the things that have replaced our gods are things that we've made ourselves. in a lot of ways.
No, I
mean,
do agree.
that would tie. Sorry, I was just going to say that would tie into back then when lightning was a god. It's because they didn't know how lightning works. But now we have physics and this kind of understanding. We have to stretch our imagination out to something that we don't understand, and we're at a level now where some people understand quantum things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I kind of agree with that. I don't agree with that premise completely. I do think that if we're going from the ideas that we think that there are some sort of form of ancient aliens, because if we are going under that think tank or that think thought experiment, we have to take that as a guide, so to speak. I just find it very, very interesting that, as I said before, that the Southern Hemisphere had a collection of gods and deities that were very, very similar to each other from crossing continents, when the Northern Hemisphere had completely and utterly different forms of gods. For instance, take Native Americans compared to Aztecs. They were considered to be around about the same sort of era. They grew up in the same sort of time frame, but yet they had a completely different religious sect, completely different religious ideology. They were more of the earth and things like that, and how the Mother Earth was able to do this and Mother Earth was able to do that. Where the Aztecs were more about it's a god and these gods visit us and we must sacrifice to the sun and so on and so forth. It just shows you difference in the idea of religion in itself, just from the different hemispheres, and that's even on the same continent. I just find that very, very interesting.
Yeah, if it's time, I think I've kind of talked about my actual solid views enough, but like I think it's time to put the tinfoil hat on, and I'm thinking, if the aliens were here, and imagine they behaved the way that we think of the people in Star Trek behaving, imagine they're here and have been for a very long time, but they have a rule or an interest in us, which says they're not going to interfere much, and they have technology that we can perhaps conceive of. Maybe they're walking like it's maybe the classic thing of they're just walking around with human skin on, like whispering words in the president's ear, or telling a religious guy a certain idea to try and bump us forward a bit, but not actually appearing to, what would you say, openly? That's how I would do it if I was an alien. I'd be manipulating subtly.
Sorry, what? What was that, Moss? Sorry, mate. I didn't hear what you said. Okay.
I was saying.
To be fair, mate, your microphone must be falling apart if you're still talking. It's just not doing too well. I do agree with.
It's the internet.
No worries. We can hear that bit. I do actually agree with you in part on the ideas that if aliens were around and that they were sort of the emphasis of being able to create us and certain things like that, then surely they would be able to control us necessarily from the shadows, for instance. Not to go on David Icke's tangent, although the reptilians are infiltrated every single form of hierarchy that we have, but it would be interesting to see how they would interact with people. Would they have created underground bases, like some people say? Would they be underwater? And even though we've only, as we said before, only actually gone through 5% of what's underneath the oceans, how do we know if there is or there isn't anything underneath the water? There's a spaceship kind of rock formation that's near Scandinavia. It looks like the Millennium Falcon. Do we know if that's a spaceship or not? No, the government won't let us go and have a look at it, even if you were able to fund it from yourself. Now,
well, you're only hiding from NASA, really, if you think about it. You're not really hiding from humanity. You're just hiding from NASA. So if you just hide from them, you would be able to have a spaceship anywhere, and nobody would be able to even see it.
Well, how do you think that NASA was created? Maybe NASA was created from the idea of being able to get them back into their homeland.
Yeah, well, I say that the aliens have been manipulating us. Why is it? It doesn't necessarily have to be negative. It could be positive. It could have been that we would have blown each other up like 60,000 times already, and they've been going, guys, I'm an alien. We think you guys are pretty cool. Listen to me. You don't want to do this. Like it could be a benevolent alien.
Well, if you have
I kind of think it's the. Oh, sorry, common sense.
No, I was literally just.
I kind of think it's.
I was going to make a quick point, Alan. Please carry on. I was going to say, has nobody ever watched Paul before?
Well, no, and what if, like, I like the zoo hypothesis, to where we're out in the distant part of the Milky Way galaxy, and they just don't really want to interfere. It's almost like, you know, Star Trek and Prime Directive. You know, just leave these people alone until they're on our level.
Mm-hmm.
No, I can see that.
Yeah, does anybody think that, actually? Does anybody think that we're just waiting for, and it might not be technological, it might be some kind of spiritual advance, I don't know, but there's gonna be an event, and they're just gonna drop down and go, aha, we've been waiting. You know, does anybody think that's happening? I have no opinion on that at all. I just think it'd be cool if it did.
That's actually more likely than any of them. At the end of the day, if you went somewhere and you saw a race of people that were lobbying, for want of a better, the power of the sun at each other, i.e. nukes, would you really want to be the one that goes down and goes, hi, we're friendly? No, you're going to stay the hell away from these lunatics until they've either A, wiped themselves out, or B, finally evolved enough to realize that nuking each other is not necessarily a good plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
no, I do understand and agree with your premise on both of your promises, to be fair. But I still feel that if you're able to maybe not create us, but necessarily create interstellar travel, then you'd be able to watch us from afar without going through any sort of form of visual representation. You would only visually be able to see if you were up there. Hence why so many people say that astronauts are lying, because they must have seen aliens up there. To the point where somebody thinks that some people think that there's aliens hiding behind the dark side of the moon, and that's the reason why you never see the dark side of the moon, which is actually not true, but besides the point. But you...
Should I be the one to point out the Black Knight satellite at this point, or should I keep that one quiet for now?
No, you can quite easily point it out. It's just a case of, yeah, there's radio signals that have been reported that have come from it, but again, we're going on NASA, so if people want to go that I'm a NASA lab, then whatever. They've apparently done some tests on it, and they only think that it's a rock. But then again, you have the perfect orbit where it completely and utterly self-rights itself going around the planet, and we can't even do that with fucking space stations with the ideas of all the mathematics that we already fucking know. So I don't know how a simple rock is able to do that for that length of time as well.
Not just that, it actually alters where it is dependent on its necessity. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because we've had the ISS has seen it. Oh, and I don't know if you know about this, but whenever the ISS whenever the ISS gets to a point where it can see it, the ISS feed is actually automatically cut off to us mere humans on the planet.
There's a really, I would like to put this to you, and then I want you to imagine this story, but like 1,000,000 years ago. There's this comic book, which is, it's kind of like this Russian version of Superman, and you know, he lands in a spaceship, and everybody gets told it's a comet that hit a mountain, and he comes out and he grows up, and he's this indestructible Hercules type figure, and the communists use him to beat the shit out of the Americans. And what happens is gradually he gets more and more powerful, but he realizes that his influence is making the world more unstable, not less, because he's this hero figure, but people aren't doing stuff for themselves anymore, they're just following him. So what he does is he pretends that he's got old and died and fucks off, but he's actually still doing stuff all around the world, it's just nobody knows anything about him. And it's like, imagine that, but 1,000,000 years ago. There's a story for you, you know, maybe something like that.
I love that Superman creation story. I do love that story. It's a good story.
Because imagine he couldn't die, and he's just he started off, you know, doing stuff, and all the other chimps were like, holy shit, look at Super Chimp over there, and he's like, oh crap, this isn't good, you know.
And
so he
hope
just
you hear me
disappeared, and
say
he's been watching us all this time, but he's from outer space.
I hope you hear me say it, but that could tie into all these beliefs about people like G's and all these magical figures in the past. Someone accidentally met him,
or he's having kids.
Then that story got told on.
You're breaking up again, Mark. Sorry, dude.
Yeah, I'll stop.
See, when you stop, you're flying. We can actually hear you when you're just about to stop.
That's the really
And I
weird
make more sense.
You start to have your speech, it comes out perfect, and then about 3 seconds in, it goes robot, and then just as you get to the end, it's back to perfect English speech again. I'm telling you now, it's aliens. They're blocking your truth.
Yes,
the CIA
and no
knows.
answers only.
The CIA knows, mate. The CIA knows.
Well, everyone knows the CIA are run by aliens.
I agree. So's the NSA.
I've never wished I had the fucking X-Files theme on my phone more than right now. I would have started playing.
That's Twilight. Fuck.
Yeah, hold on. Nice try. Nice idea, though.
Fuck.
Which does kind of suggest then, does that mean that MC is actually a spy for the aliens? How about you think about that one, Mad?
He's a smoking man.
That wouldn't surprise me.
I don't know though. I've watched a lot of the Ancient Aliens show. I really like it. So this whole idea actually kind of resonates with me because it really explains the origin stories for most of the religions. If you really look at it, and then you look at all the cave art and all this other weird stuff that they show, or like the Nazca lines. I mean, that kind of looks like an airport to me. But then again, why would the aliens need a fucking airport? So, you know,
to go on holiday, duh.
Yeah, so it kind of contradicts itself. If they're so powerful that they use Earth as a hub, and we were some kind of slave race, why did they need a slave race? Why do they need the Nazca lines? Why would you build the pyramids as a power plant? I mean, it's all kind of counterintuitive, isn't it?
Not really, because you're assuming that they've got some sort of anti-gravity technology. What if they are still using thrusters? So the whole point of the airport design would still actually apply. They would still need a runway, for want of a better term.
You know, that's a good point. And if you thought about it like they were from Mars, then that would make a lot of sense. They could use thrusters. They could have been the ancient civilization on Mars and then seeded Earth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and replacing my tinfoil hat as well. If you think of the stopping speed of a car, right, and the stopping distance of a car that's going at like 30 miles an hour. That's a fair bit of stopping distance. Imagine that, but at light speed. You would need a big, long ass runway.
I don't know if anybody wants to change topics very quickly.
Go on.
But a person has just scaled the Statue of Liberty following anti-ICE protests.
Oh god.
Are you? They climbed the Statue of Liberty.
They climbed up to where the feet are.
Well, that's hard. That's not very impressive. I imagined somebody up on the fucking torch just dangling.
Well, what I'll try and do, if I can ever remember how to fucking do this, I'll share it from my phone, and then I can send it to myself, and then I can quickly put it up. We can watch the video.
Well, this is the conspiracy, and because it's the conspiracy, I'm saying 100% that's orchestrated because the security around the Statue of Liberty is mind-bogglingly high. Especially if they think there's going to be an incident or it's, the 4th of bloody July. So that was allowed to happen.
I'm getting there, guys. I'm getting there.
No. Oh, Moz's mic kept breaking up, so I'll read what he just wrote. Well, maybe the Mexican border wall should be 10 feet higher than the statue's feet. That's great, dude.
Nice.
Makes perfect sense, though, doesn't it? Makes fucking perfect sense. Right then, guys, this is...
Can I just say, was it Jensen? Was it you that was saying about the genetic splicing?
Yes.
No, that was me.
Well,
right, I'm gonna humor you here with the aliens thing, because if there's one point at which I think that there's a potential alien intervention that is possible, it would be this one. In our cells, we have mitochondria, which is a form of bacteria. You probably know about them, but humans and or whatever, you know, crustaceans or whatever we were before. And the mitochondria, it was initially a parasite, but it became a symbiote, so we, involved it helping each other out, and that's how humans can create so much energy, and mammals and all that sort of stuff. Now, the chances of that happening without one or the other killing each other, like our immune system killing the mitochondria, or the mitochondria trying to kill us like a virus, is like such a low chance that I can't imagine like a couple of aliens in a lab, and Bob's got the mitochondria over there, and Mick's got the human over here, and he's like, Bob, pass that over. Like there's one point I think it could have been some kind of interfering. I don't know what you think.
No, I completely not agree. If you look at our genetic codes as humans, our codes actually deteriorate around about, I'm not exaggerating, around about 10 times quicker than what animals' codes deteriorate. By deteriorate, I mean we have more genetic defects than any other animal or any other plant or any other carbon-based life form on the planet. That's including obviously other chimps and other primates that are even anywhere close to us. We have 10 times the amount of genetic deformities in our own genetics than any other animal. Why would that be? Just as an open question to people.
Like you said, we are basically gene jokes. We were created, whether it was deliberate or an accident, because at the end of the day, we're sitting there assuming that we were created. We could literally be an accident. Like
we're the burst condom of the universe.
Yes, actually. Our planet, just as, as we're tinfoiling like a good one here, we could literally be the planet that is experimented on, i.e., let's see what happens if we mix this and this. Oh, that works. Let's grab that and take it somewhere else. And then they've found us and went, yeah, let's just leave that here. That's just not working. I mean, look at it. It's falling apart around the edges. Just
what about if they found Homo erectus, for instance, before it turned into the humanoids that we see now? Homo erectus as an actual primate, or just on the verge of turning. And what happens if they made 2 to 3, maybe even 4 different aspects of humanoids or humans that could be able to help them in different areas? And that's the reason why we have humanoids that were created in the form of sub-Saharan Africans, while we have humanoids that were created as Neanderthals, and while we have a couple of others towards the Philippines. Why were they all separate and created around about the same sort of time? That would be very, very interesting to be able to find out. I know we never will, but that would be very interesting.
Yeah, and imagine it was like a farm or something, right? If you think of Homo sapien are smart but fragile, but the Neanderthals were like hard as fuck and kind of just a few steps behind us in the intelligence department. So imagine like they were farming good specimens for, I don't know, war or something like that, and they found the Neanderthals and went, damn, these guys are tough, but they're a bit stupid. Hang on, they take a Homo sapien brain and take all the Neanderthals away, and they don't need us anymore. We're just the leftovers.
That's correct. I mean, if we look at it from an evolutionary point of view, just for a second, take off our tinfoil hats and put back on our normal hats, for instance.
Oh, okay then.
Just for a second, just literally for a couple of seconds, because if you look at the sub-Saharan Africans that we actually are descended from directly, we actually were interbreeding with Neanderthals, and that's probably the reason why our pigmentation of our skin changed. Not just because we were adapting to the different areas over the course of evolution, but because we were selectively breeding to be able to breed and live in the actual areas where we were.
Actually, and that's a plausible theory, because if I don't know if you guys know anything about the guy called Francis Pryor. He makes history documentaries, and he's an archaeologist, and he basically was instrumental in disproving and popularizing the disproving of both the Saxon invasion, I think it was, and the Roman invasion, in that they weren't invasions, they were like just coming togethers of societies. And it's like, well, history's been wrong about both those invasions as to how they happened. What's to say they were correct about the Neanderthals? Maybe we didn't kill them off. I know we killed a lot of them, but you know, it's possible.
No, I actually agree with that.
You agree with it that much? It's worth that many actuallys.
Actually cubed.
I didn't say it 4 times. I said it 3 times, so I times it by 3. I trebled it. Fuck's sake, I've been drinking too much.
No such thing.
But no, I absolutely love these talks of going off into tangents and just actually going through different ideas of being able to go through stuff like that. And I think that's absolutely amazing. Simply because who else would come up with the ideas that instead of it being natural selection, so to speak, that it was actually selective breeding, which in itself would actually classify as a Nazi idea as eugenics, just without the actual science behind it. Or am I on my own now?
Could you repeat that? You went a bit... well, I think I went a bit funny. My bandwidth went a bit funny.
It's probably because I said Nazi. The reason what I was trying to say was that because you have the idea of what we just said about the idea of sub-Saharan Africans selectively breeding with Neanderthals to try and be able to cope with the Northern Hemisphere's temperature changes and the lack of vitamin E in the lack of the vitamin E in the sunlight and everything. Is that a reason for them classifying it as the idea of eugenics, that they were selectively choosing the traits of who they were going to breed with before the idea even come up from the idea of Nazism?
Well, that's what I don't know about the Nazi connotation, but
well, it was eugenics is more of a classification of Nazi as in selective breeding.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, this is the thing. There's 2 types of eugenics. There's positive and negative eugenics, right? Negative eugenics is what was done in the 1900s leading up to the Nazism, very popular, and that was negative eugenics because they were saying, right, these people are deficient, we need rid of them. But positive eugenics are you liking the look of somebody and having sex with them. That's what positive eugenics is. We do it with dogs. You don't kill off dogs that are weak. You breed dogs together that are strong. The Chinese despicably have tried to do this with different people over the centuries. But yeah, no, if you think about it, right, if you're the Neanderthals, considering what people were like back then, Neanderthals probably didn't look all that wildly different to us. Like, if you saw one now, yeah, okay, but particularly men, if you look at a Neanderthal skull, they just have hyper-masculine figures, you know, like the big jaw and the big eyebrows and stuff. So if you imagine that, like, maybe you've got Homo sapien men who look manly, and that's the features you like about them, and you've got a Neanderthal man who's not too Neanderthal-y looking, but he's super strong because he's a Neanderthal, and you know he can protect you. As a woman, why wouldn't you breed with that guy? Like, he's got a big bit of land, he's strong as fuck, he doesn't look all that different to the guys in your area, and he can, like you say, he can survive cold temperatures. Why wouldn't you?
Well, you also got the added bit as well that the Homo erectus themselves, or humans as they are called now, the sub-Saharan Africans, as we were, should I say, would have also have noticed that their children were able to actually live and grow up most of the time. Obviously, general diseases would have crippled them in general, but generally they would have been able to populate and procreate very, very well and be able to actually have children that actually live. Where because they were trying to push up into the Northern Hemisphere, obviously everybody's heard of rickets, haven't they?
Yes.
So wouldn't that still be the same thing for sub-Saharan early humans? I'll do it that way. Wouldn't that be the same thing for early humans, as in the case that they would have some sort or some similar diseases of the same ilk, as obviously they would be of a different skin colour, melanin and everything else like that. Surely that colour would still have the same deficiencies as it would do from the sub-Saharan Africans that are there today. For instance, they need to have extra pills in a shot or something, don't they, to be able to get rid of rickets? So surely that would be one of the most important things to them, to be able to mate with people that can live in those areas, because they can see that they're having children. So surely that would be the biggest aspect of choosing your eugenics.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that another thing that seems to be supported more and more by scientists is the fact that there wasn't... People go on about the intelligence difference between the Neanderthals and the Homo sapiens, but it seems to have been more of a cultural difference, because we were like, if you want to use IQ terms, right? There was probably only a few points of difference between average human and average Neanderthal, but the difference between us was we traded with each other.
It depends. You're correct on what you're saying afterwards, but a lot of people would say that individual Neanderthals are actually smarter and stronger than humans.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the giants in Game of Thrones or whatever. You know, like they're smarter, they're stronger, and they've got, you know, thicker skin and better weapons. But there's only one of them, and they try to do everything themselves. So the humans just swarm them with a multitude of tools that they can't handle. Meanwhile, all the other humans behind them are building things and keeping the campfires warm and keeping the women pregnant. You know, like, because we specialize and they didn't, and they had to do everything themselves. It wasn't really, in my opinion, a question of intelligence. I mean, if they discover something new, they might find that case, but it doesn't seem to have been all that much to do with intelligence, and more to do with, like what you're saying, it could be potentially things like disease resistance and just actual sexual attraction, and the fact that we traded and specialized and they didn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's lots of you can quite easily go to the point of 4% of almost every white European or people that have been in the Northern Hemisphere for a long time have around about 4 to 5% DNA from Neanderthals, and that's from sequencing the genome, and that's both of our genomes. And it proves the fact that around 4% of Europeans and even North Americans have 4% to 5% Neanderthal DNA in them. So that in itself should prove that we procreated with Neanderthals.
And then it would explain why, you know, like if you think about it, imagine the Neanderthals have, they don't vote, but, you know, you could take a public opinion of Neanderthals and imagine like 80% of them said, nah, the other humans are cool, we want to build cities with them and have loads of babies with them. And then 20% of them think we're scum and want to go to war with us. Well, that means 100% of humanity wants to survive, plus 80% of the Neanderthals. And they just go, well, to hell with you, and kick their heads in.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely a plausible theory, especially when you consider the fact that Neanderthals were considered to be very sparse in their living conditions. They roamed, their territory was very big, but their actual living quarters was considered to be very small, very, very small indeed. Their hunting parties travelled very, very far, but their living conditions were very, very small townships. Not very big at all, considering that they had a hell of a long time to populate the areas that they were in. But no, they didn't. They were very, very sparsely populated. Well, we don't do sparsely populated. We, as humans, we go into a particular area and we completely breed to an uncontrollable point and completely deplete the natural resources that are there, and then either try and force trade with ourselves to bring more people and more resources into that area, or we just move to another area and do exactly the same thing. Where Neanderthals didn't seem to do that. They seemed to live within their means, so to speak, and were sparsely populated. And as you said before, socially, they didn't seem to want too many people around with them. In fact, some of them are considered to be cannibals, and some of them have been considered to have incest. The genetic pool was considered to be too diverse, especially in the most populated areas of the Neanderthal area. But then again, I don't really know too much about it. Never really looked into it, honest.
Maybe humanity were the only ones brave enough to go up to the big alien settlement and ask them how they would do it.
Possible.
Well, no, one interesting thing is like the Yupik people and, you know, the natives, tribes that live up in the Arctic zone. They actually have a larger amount of Neanderthal DNA in their genome than you and I do, than Europeans. And I think that's because they were so isolated for such a long time that the Neanderthals probably were around in that area for a lot longer.
See, I thought that I'm not 100% sure, but I thought that they had the same genetic makeup or very similar genetic makeup to Native Americans.
Yeah, kind of, but they were even more isolated than you would say the Native Americans down in, the desert plains and stuff like that. They were far more isolated. Those areas, didn't even see Europeans until the late 1800s, and a lot of times. So, when you have an isolated gene pool, then what made it up to begin with, even 1,000 years ago, would still be more prominent within it, just because of the isolation.
No, very, very true. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of historians believe that when the land bridge from the tips of Russia went on to the tips of Alaska, it was a case of that people actually lived on the land bridge for a very long time. And because of the isolation of the small width of the land bridge, they think that the genetic gene pool was actually quite small on that point, and so they actually got themselves off into America and separated into Canada and North America, and as you quite rightly said, moved off into the North Pole as well. So I can see your point on that.
Here's a thought, at risk of making my tinfoil hat into like a tinfoil Viking helmet. What if all these diseases that we can't explain the origin of are alien pathogens that are the equivalent of when we went over to America with the flu?
It's a possibility. It's definitely a possibility. What about the idea of anthrax? Anthrax has been hidden for such a long time in the permafrost, for instance, and that's the only places where it grows. It grows in Russia and Siberia, in that area. And it's a case of, we didn't have any idea of that, but that's been around for a hell of a long fucking time. So is it a possibility that the diseases themselves have been dormant for such a long time that we haven't had the chance to grow immunity to them, first of all? Or, as you said, is it something that's been produced and reintegrated into human society? I mean, look at the Black Death. Look how quickly that fucking went around. The Spanish flu, that type of stuff. How did that all start? How did it?
Well, they're, like you say, they're bamboozled by the genetics of anthrax. They're bamboozled by the genetics of AIDS. They're bamboozled by the genetics of Ebola. Like, how quickly these things evolve and where they came from. They can't really identify the particular virus that it used to be, and maybe it mutated too fast, but maybe my tinfoil hat tells me maybe it was the fucking aliens.
I'm not saying it was the alien, but it was the alien.
Well, it might not really need to be aliens either. How many asteroids come into the Earth every year? How many meteor showers are there? Those are evaporating within our atmosphere, yes, but there could be a pathogen within them that disperses somewhere.
I know, it's very, very true. They could quite easily be that.
The other thing is that people always, when they say they've been abducted by aliens, they always seem to be abducted into a lab somewhere. So maybe, it's laboratory conditions because they can't meet us without killing us.
That's definitely true. I mean, if you look at even the consideration of War of the Worlds, for instance, it wasn't the fact that we, by any stretch of the imagination, was going to beat them technologically. It was a case of that they didn't develop the flu. I mean, as what's his name? As the author actually wrote down, it was the fact that they didn't have the right to be here, so to speak. They didn't earn their place as H.G. Wells. Thank you, John. It's a case that he wrote that it was a case of they didn't have the right. They didn't genetically have the disposition to be able to live here because they didn't go through the process of evolution, the survival of the fittest, so to speak, to develop a natural defense against it. So it's quite plausible that it would be an idea that if they would be affected by us, then we would be affected by them. Because their illnesses would kill us the same as our illnesses would kill them. So it was quite plausible that they would have to do it in lab coats and wear little green suits and whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
This conversation is dying. Yay, more alcohol's needed.
There was a thing that just occurred to me while you were talking there about what if we've got it backwards? You know how it's like, oh yeah, the aliens came down and we said they were gods. What if they're gods and we keep telling ourselves they're aliens? Like, what if it's angels are visiting people and it's like, oh, I've been abducted by aliens. It's like, no, it was a fucking angel, man, or you spoke to God. You know, like what? Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's like a spiritual thing, and people don't know how to process it. And they say, it's a UFO.
It could well be. It could even be a form of it not actually physically happening. It could only be something that could be psychologically happening, as in the actual, as you quite rightly said, the abductions themselves might not be a physical adoption. Adoption? Yeah, abduction. I don't do a lot of abducting. I do a lot of adoption, but not abduction. But it could be the fact that because we physically, as we just went over, couldn't actually spend any time with them. Maybe it's a case that they take our brains to find out what we would actually perceive in a form of virtual reality type thing of how we would react to certain pain and certain things like that. Maybe it's a case of it's just a psychological experience rather than an actual physical experience. As you said, a spiritual experience.
That's actually worrying. That might be right.
No, it has to be aliens.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's aliens, but you know, aliens.
Would explain why we can't find Bigfoot, because he's actually an alien and he keeps buggering off back to his home planet, man. There you go.
God damn it. I'm going to be fucked with about Bigfoot forever now.
Conspiracyception.
Yeah, I'm not even going to go into that. Last time we went into that, it wasn't good. I'm going to leave that one.
The Bigfoot thing, I'm sorry.
No, you're all right. It's not a problem. It doesn't matter. It honestly doesn't matter at all. But there is a thing with the Bigfoot conspiracy thing. If you do have any sort of ideas on that, it's a case of a lot of people would presume that they don't actually talk, that they actually use their brains to psychologically interact with people and their own kin. So in itself, would it be a fact that they're actually more sentient than we are, if you do believe in the idea of Bigfoot? Would that be a form of genetic slicing as well? Because they're obviously supposed to be bigger than us as well, and faster and stronger than us. And if they can psychologically talk with each other and us as well, does that mean that they're actually more sentient than what we are? And does that mean that somebody's created them?
Good point.
I've never heard that theory before. That's actually kind of interesting.
I just made it
freaky.
I figured you did, because I had never heard that before. I was like, yeah, but no, that would be an interesting. You should write something up on Wikipedia, and then people will start believing that shit. Suddenly, Bigfoot's fucking telepathic. You know, he's fucking Deanna Troi from Star Trek all of a sudden.
No, there is actually, if you actually look into the ideas of Bigfoot, a lot of people actually do think that Bigfoot actually communicates psychologically.
Yeah.
Psychically, rather, sorry.
That's right. That's what I was about to say. You may be making it up as you go along, but you might not. It might be something you've actually heard somewhere else, because I've actually heard that elsewhere. The fact that they have some form of psychic communication, or at least a communication that we can't pick up on. We would just use the term psychic to describe.
If you think of how sophisticated human non-verbal communication is, it only takes a few more steps before you're basically communicating on a level that we couldn't even fathom. I mean, like, our faces, like the muscles around our eyes are so sensitive. You can like fire a single line of neurons in your face in some areas, which is like, microscopic. Imagine Bigfoot with all his fur and stuff. They're looking at each other and we don't see anything happen, but like a tiny twitch of fur around the eye that means something, and before you know it, they've had a conversation and we didn't even know anything happened.
It's a possibility. I mean, a lot of people are coming up with the ideas that dolphins actually have a language, that they can actually communicate with each other, especially with the way that they interact by making their sounds when they're actually hunting. The same as killer whales, that they're or orcas. They can constantly talking to each other when they're actually hunting, when they're hunting in a group. So I don't think that we're the only animals that actually have a form of communication. We may be the only animals that we can understand the communication, but I don't think we're the only ones.
The other thing with the alien thing is, if you think about it, brain-wise, a lot of the reason that we are ahead of other creatures is opposable thumbs, right? Whales don't have hands, so they're automatically limited as to what they'll be able to do with their lives. And that's why their brains are so far behind us. But their language skills, you know, the material is all there. So if you've got like an alien species, and we can't see them, we can't communicate with them, blah, 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 blah. Maybe they have an equivalent of thumbs. Like, maybe they have like one thing about them that's just a teeny bit different to us, that's enough to be a complete game changer in regards to how they behave.
Well, if you actually look at using dolphins again, if you actually look at dolphins' complex hierarchical system, for instance, when they're in pods, it's very similar to hierarchy in groups and gangs, and that they have different levels of matriarchs and patriarchs and things like that. But they actually have like their sergeants and things like that. They have lower hierarchies all the way through. To the point where they actually can help each other clean themselves. So, like, if they've got stuff on their belly that they can't get rid of, somebody else will come along and do it for them. And they're actually always communicating all the time. I find that sort of stuff really fucking interesting. Also, with the killer whales, as I said before, they actually are always talking when they're hunting. So, when you get killer whales that are hunting in the Antarctic, for instance, they do a specific thing that no other killer whale actually does in the Arctic. They completely pen in the seals so that they're right near the edge of land. And one of them will swim up and will actually push the seal all the way into land so it can't actually escape. And the whale will almost beach itself to get to the seal. Now, this is a technique that they've learned over generations and generations. But that in itself is the most important word. They have learned it. And it's completely different to any other species in their species. Completely different. They only hunt that way up in the Antarctic. I find that sort of stuff.
No, I had no idea about that. That's amazing.
I really find that sort of stuff really interesting. You also have other versions of orca whales when they're hunting sardines and things like that, the ones that go into the spiral balls. They actually are constantly talking to each other to actually make sure that it goes all the way to the top, and then they take turns on eating it. They do that. That's in Scandinavia. I like killer whales. Leave me alone.
Well, they had the thing in Star Trek again, where, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche now, but the aliens weren't waiting on speaking to us; they were waiting on speaking to the whales.
No, that's not Star Trek. That's not Star Trek. You want dolphins and you want Hitchhiker's Guide.
True.
Oh yes, good point. But you know what I mean? Like, maybe we're just that they've got their nature cameras set up and we keep getting in the way and they're not even interested in us because they, you know, whales are made in the alien's image. They've just not grown arms and started using computers yet.
True.
And then it'll happen and they'll come down and be like, oh my god, aliens! And they'll speak to the whales and fuck off again and we'll just be left, you know, like...
Yeah, we don't care about you. We weren't here for you. Fuck off.
Oh, better that than they build an interspace bypass.
Yeah.
Well, they could. I mean, it would only destroy us, and the whole reason for that would be 42.
Yeah. But luckily, there will be 2 white mice that will survive. This we know.
Yes, and one person with a book.
And never forget the towel.
Yeah. Let's go and make some more planets anyway. I do love the Hitchhiker's Guide. It's fucking funny as well.
Maybe that was how we were created as well. Maybe they've got hyper improbability drive. And they pressed it to get out of a sticky situation, and then, like, just halfway across the universe, humans just beep. There we are.
Here we go.
Mistake. Yeah.
Like they don't even know we're here.
Yeah. How we doing, Daddy? How we doing? I don't give a shit. Who the fuck are you?
Can you imagine the reaction of humans if they actually found out that we were completely unimportant to the aliens, as we're calling them?
We would kill them.
No, it's not. No, we wouldn't. The thing that we would actually do is the same thing as what religious people do to atheists. We would completely and utterly deny their existence. We completely deny their existence so we can say that we still believe in this and we still believe in that. We completely deny their existence because that's how humans work. If we destroy our own belief system, generally we don't want to have a look at some other belief system that we haven't taking the time to actually have a look at. We make our own belief system. As soon as it's attacked, we either attack back or we deny it. That's just the way human psychological works. Human psyche works. Sorry, we either deny it or we attack it.
And that's why I'm saying we're going to attack it. We're going to kill them. We're not important. You're here for the dolphins. Well, fuck the dolphins too. You're dead too. You're dead to me, dolphins.
I wonder if it's even like this idea of, looking out the window just now, and maybe there's an alien perched on the roof, and it's like they're waiting on us leveling up somehow mentally before we can see them. And then when we do, it's like, will we even be able to communicate with them? Will we have to level up again to speak to them? Like, what if they're just kicking around? Because people say they walk among us, but what if they're not even walking among us? What if they're just, like, floating about? Maybe we're scaring the shit out of them. Maybe they can't see us properly, and we're like ghosts to them. We completely scare the crap out of them, and that's why they've not said hello.
No, it's definitely a possibility. I'm going to bring up something that everybody's going to fucking hate, but it's a possibility, and I have to fucking mention it.
Go on.
What about the idea of spiritual science, as in the idea that we originated from Mars and we have people that originated from Venus, and those people went to Mars and completely destroyed Mars, and then were able to bring Mars down to Earth and made Atlantis and all that sort of stuff. But they believed in the idea of collective evolution, the idea that we were a feminine species to begin with, and the reasons why we started to fall, so to speak, is because of the idea of Venus making it more of a masculine, the idea of fighting and everything else of that. It's to do with the conscious of humans, the fact that the conscious of humans has collapsed. We were at a high point at one point, and then we completely and utterly collapsed. And then we've now started to level ourselves back up again to go on to crumple points and point. And that's the case of maybe it is a issue where we could actually take it and actually say, well, yeah, we are leveling up slowly, but did we ever have a collective evolution of when we were actually at a high point in society, when we could understand and see the world from different dimensions? Yeah, I know, I had to bring it up.
So you mean like a precursor society, or do you mean
the
specific thing of like men are from Mars and women are from Venus, or what?
It's actually technically would be the reverse way around in the spiritual science guy. But I remember I'm a skeptic doing a video on it where this guy actually believed in the idea of social spiritual science of fucking that's how much I really paid attention. I'm sorry, but it's an interesting idea and it's an interesting concept. But I don't think I'm doing it well, I couldn't do it justice. It's a fucking stupid idea anyway, but it is an interesting idea where
it's
it was the idea of yes, it is definitely a fucking myth.
It's not only does it mirror how human society has actually evolved, but it's a myth in all the societies you mentioned already. When we were talking about Egyptians and Hindus and things like that. Initially, if we just use Egyptians, because everybody's relatively, they can picture that quite easily. Yeah. Isis and Osiris, it was Isis that was the godhead, and the society was matriarchal. And what happened was they had all these castration rituals, and women were in charge. And I don't mean logistically. Nobody really knows that. Nobody knows whether they had like male rulers or female rulers, but the society was matriarchal in the sense that the females were the priority, and men existed to fertilize them and pass on the next generation, and then they got kicked out to go and hunt and gather, and the women controlled the family. And then gradually it moved towards what we would consider a nuclear family to be. So before then, Isis was more like Loki from Norse mythology, like she was just this maniacal, evil, crazy thing. And then what happened was, as we became more patriarchal, Osiris came along, and he had like power over her, and the myths started to change. And that's perfectly mirrors what you're saying about this dude with the spiritual science. It's a myth. Like, I think the guy doesn't even realize what he's onto, and it's actually sad that he's
he knows.
Tried to science it rather than see it for what it is, which is he's kind of rediscovered an ancient psychological mechanism, which is pretty cool.
No, he definitely knew. I was actually going to do a video on it, but I see that all of the religious people that do their anti-religious stuff have all done it on it, and it's just like, yeah, okay, I'll leave that one. But I did find it quite interesting to watch. I mean, the story itself is interesting, but I still take the story as a pinch of fucking salt, obviously. But it was an interesting story and an interesting concept. I just think it's interesting because none of us really, and I mean that as a humanitarian stance, a humanity stance, none of us really know, excuse me, what actually has happened and what's gone on and where we were to come from and what happened and how we actually evolved into who we are. Hence why we don't have any sort of missing links or anything else of that. Now, before I go any further on this tinfoil hat wearing exercise, don't think that I don't believe in evolution. I do fucking believe in evolution. But from the process of this idea, there is no forms of missing links at the minute. So how do we actually find, I know people go, oh, what about Lucy? It's like, there's no definitive proof that that is the missing link. It is a transition fossil that doesn't transition directly into a humanoid fossil. It transitions from the bit before to that bit, but doesn't transition to a humanoid. Again, I believe in evolution. Please don't shoot me. Please don't kill me. I believe in evolution. But my point is that we don't know. We don't know if we were created by aliens. We don't know if we were created by God. We don't know these things. We don't know if we were, as other people have said, were thrown down by a meteorite or an asteroid as it's coming into Earth. We don't know if we were created by these issues. We don't know if, as Mad Dog just said before, we don't know if the reasons why we were created were because we come down on the asteroid that actually killed the dinosaurs. We don't know these things.
That would be the most metal thing ever, by the way, if we just rode down on a fucking asteroid.
I had my head, I have to say, yeah, I can see that. That's funny.
A bit of Led Zeppelin or AC/DC playing. We were riding this asteroid, knocking the shit out of all the dinosaurs.
Puppet Master, surely. It's got to be Metallica Puppet Master, surely.
Oh yeah, okay, let's do that then. Okay.
Well, that would work. Either that or AC/DC Highway to Hell. Oh, yeah. I mean, come on, that's good.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. No, that's definitely very, very good. We could always have System of a Down Toxicity.
Apt description for humanity.
Oh, Jensen.
All I was saying is a very appropriate description for humanity, isn't it?
Or we could have Papa Roach, Angels and Insects.
Yeah, that'd work.
I do not like metal music. Fuck you all. Oh, come on, guys. Somebody else take over for a bit. I'm done talking for a while.
Well, in all fairness, I'm still waiting for you to show the bloody thing about the idiot climbing on the Statue of Liberty, or did I miss that somewhere?
Oh, do we have to? I was enjoying the escapism from the blooming anti-culture maniacs.
Yeah.
That's proof there are no aliens, by the way. If there were aliens and intelligent life out there, they'd be looking at this stream and they'd be going, you know what, these guys aren't half bad. Let's get rid of all these SJW maniacs and help them out a bit.
Oh, that was so good.
Yeah, aliens, if you're listening, bring beer.
Don't bring beer, bring Jack Daniels.
Oh, nice.
It's a honey one. Nice choice.
Love the honey.
Oh, yeah.
Does everybody want me to bring that up then to do that story? And then we'll finish on that story.
I think you might as well, because I think we've kind of beaten the aliens to death unless they're going to turn up soon and reveal anything. And 1, 2, 3, no, they didn't.
I reckon there's about 50 sci-fi novels in this stream. If people were to watch it, there's 50 potential sci-fi novels that we've just discussed.
Definitely, I definitely agree with that. Anybody that wants any sort of divine inspiration, come see us. We know aliens.
Well, Crumple, we know you're good with your comic books. You have permission to use any of these crazy ideas to write your own comic books. Just
fuck you. You don't have the intellectual property of me. Fuck you.
Nice. Somebody
right,
brought
I'll
it
make
up.
sure to only use me, Jensen, and Mad Dodge's idea, and Moz from when he was here.
Then he'll get pissed off because he wasn't involved as well. No, I say you use his ideas. Don't matter what he thinks anyway. It's only your stream. What do you know?
Exactly. I do have one more question for everybody. On the idea of aliens in themselves, if we are to believe that there is some form of aliens in themselves, if we are to believe, do we think that they are more likely to be insectoids, reptoids, greys, gaseous, or silicon-based?
I'd actually go insectoid first.
I'm going Romulan.
So humanoid, right? Yeah, so humanoid.
I'm going to be my usual verbose self. I reckon that Jensen might be onto something because insectoid is like the most efficient form we've discovered. But I really love the idea of, like I mentioned, Crisis before. What they did was they're like jelly, like cephalopods, and they've got like these tendrils. And what they did was they actually built themselves like Iron Man suits to contain their jelly bodies. And I love the idea of it being something like that, or a gas, like something like truly alien and fucking weird.
Well, the insectoid thing makes me think that now that Trump's making the Space Force, that we really are going to go kill some bugs. I mean...
Starship Troopers, baby. Starship Troopers.
Which would explain the asteroids that are sent, giving us all these diseases. It's the aliens launching them, and it's taken this long to actually get here, that the diseases are affecting...
the death of Pandera. Death of Pandera. Near Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
Don't kill my parents. I don't want to join up anymore. I'm being whipped. Sorry,
Hey,
I'm
here's a
reliving my
theory
Starship
for you.
Troopers days. I'm reliving my Starship Troopers. It's fine.
Just so it's clear, I was always on the bug side.
You would be. You're against humanity.
I knew it. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You would have fucking chose the bug side. God damn it, Quinn.
You old misanthrope, you.
The good thing is, the brain bug gets completely and utterly fucking brain raped at the end.
True. Then again, have you actually seen all of the films?
Yeah, well, I've seen up to 3. The rest of them are just, well, to be fair, 2 borderline crap. But after 3, everything's shit.
One thing I liked about 2 was that the bugs actually won. I liked that. It was about bloody time.
To be fair, the bugs should have won in the first place. I mean, don't get me wrong, humans are intelligent and they had mini nukes and things like that, but bugs had sheer amount of numbers and were just sheerly better.
Yeah.
Sheerly better and able to cope with the squishy humans. Squishy humans.
I say that if anything, it probably will be some sort of insectoid-based life.
See, I think it might have been something completely different. I think that it might be a form of reptilian or reptoids. The reason why I think that if there is aliens, that it would be reptilian or reptoid is because maybe the aliens are not actually aliens. Maybe they're actually an evolution from dinosaurs themselves, but not strong enough to be able to take on humanity or numerous enough to take on humanity. And maybe they're buried underground, so to speak, but only influenced from afar. Maybe that's something that could have happened. I don't know, but if there is a form of aliens, I think it is actually aliens that were created on this earth. I don't think that any other forms of life were actually able to create interstellar travel. If there was, we would be able to see it. Our governments would try and shoot everything down to be able to get it.
Well, that's one of the attractive things about the cephalopod idea to me is that because their bodies are liquid-ish with a membrane around them, there's a lot of anti-gravity out there, and there's a lot of planets that are potentially gas or liquid-based, or rock-based with liquid on top. And so these things just kind of floating around and taking form, and their brains get a little bit more sophisticated, and then one day one of them used one of their like tentacles to pick something up, and from there they start developing technology. They'd be able to survive the rigors of space travel, really hostile planets. Like if you put a cephalopod on, one planet and then you put it on a planet with much stronger gravity, well, it's just going to make them a bit less gooey, I guess. Especially if they've got armor or something on. And
well, they'd be able to deal with
attractive idea.
Living in space as well, wouldn't they? They'd actually be able to deal with living in space. Humans and humanoids, or even any sort of form that deals with cartilage and muscles, for instance, wouldn't be able to live in space. But something that is, as you quite already said, water and jelly and a membrane or just a gaseous element, would be able to physically thrive in space because it wouldn't have anything or any worries about degeneration from lack of gravity.
Yeah, and get going like crazy sci-fi on you. It's like, imagine if it's liquid, right? So it's got this liquidish body and it needs more thinking power, so it converts some of the little muscle neurons and stuff it has into thinking neurons, and it thinks its way out of the problem, then converts back to motor neurons. You know what I mean? Like if they had stem cells in them or something, you know, you could go wild with that sort of stuff, and they'd be able to do it because they'd be made of liquid. But we're solid, so we can't really do that.
Well, to be fair, you could quite easily say that the brain case in itself needs water to be able to conduct the electronical signals that actually are produced from our synapses anyway. So you could quite easily say from the liquid, creating more of a hardier substance in the top of the head or anywhere in the body. And you would actually be able to create a bigger, more secure brain anyway. So they might
and you get
non-Newtonian
gels that they're jelly, and if you hit them, they're harder than steel. But if you push them, they're like jelly. So they could even be hardier than us too.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's a very good idea. And if I ever got to choose what my nationality and race, well, what my race would be, then I would choose that.
And then you could marry me and Jensen's ideas, because if you think of the insectoid exoskeleton, imagine they're a cephalopod liquidy gooey thing, nervous system inside some kind of insect armor, effectively. There you go. You've got both.
Right.
And it could survive interstellar travel, and it could survive outer space.
Well, the thing is, it wouldn't need to worry about interstellar travel because it hasn't got anything to worry about gravitational pulls anyway. Because it's a membrane that's made of jelly, you would have to literally physically pull it apart. You wouldn't be able to have no gravity or have external gravity forces pull really hard on it, not unless you break a window and you break the membrane, so to speak. But it would actually be able to live quite comfortably in interstellar transport. It'd actually be able to live on a space station for forever because gravity wouldn't affect it, or lack thereof of gravity wouldn't actually affect it because it's a membrane. It's a liquid made of thingy. All it would do was just make it ripple. In fact, it would actually probably get more done in space than what it would do on any sort of planet that has any gravity on it.
Well, and that would maybe be how their society would work, and it would allow them to do things a lot quicker because they conduct their business on in space, and they go down to various planets to harvest or to make experiments or to build something, and then they bring it back up into space. Like, say they needed iron or they needed the gravity to build the big spaceship, so they come down, they build the thing, they put it back up. They live up there. So you know how we build stuff in space that we can't build on Earth? Well, imagine that reversed. Maybe that's how they would operate.
No, I completely and totally agree with you. In fact, it actually bodes more well for them because they could quite easily build military barracks. Say, for instance, they were wanting to invade somewhere like Earth, for instance. We wouldn't actually be able to send too much missiles up to them or be able to stop them too much because most nuclear weapons will only go up to the very edge of the atmosphere and won't actually physically go into space, not unless the payload's actually bigger on the rocket itself. So they would actually be able to build military bases, like, for instance, say near the moon, where you wouldn't necessarily be able to get a nuclear rocket to be able to go off into that direction and actually make sure that you keep it on track. So, for instance, you also have what's it called? The radiation belts as well that would actually interfere with all of the technology and everything else of that. But more importantly, while they're building, as you quite rightly said with the armor, they could quite easily look at the gravity and actually build particular metal suits or plastic suits or any sort of suits that would be able to fit that, where the gravity wouldn't actually physically affect them at all. As you quite rightly said, use some form of anti-gravity or something like that, or even better, just slug into an actual a tight fitting suit, for instance, and they'd be able to fit into it and mold into the suit's physique, be able to move around and do whatever. So I think that would actually be a much more beneficial body type and body shape than what ours would be.
In all fairness, 2 legs. I know there's the whole joke about 2 legs bad, 4 legs good, but it actually does apply. 2-legged creatures are a damn sight less efficient than quadrupeds and going upwards. At the end of the day, the reason I suggested the insect is because 6+ legs gives a stability that they would want on an alien planet, i.e. one that they're not used to. It would give them capacity to travel for, well, travel across the terrain much more securely than 2 legs, which at the end of the day is a highly inefficient way of moving.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if you think about well, I'll keep going back to the cephalopods so that you can keep talking about insects as well. But if you look at the cephalopod thing, they look like floating nervous systems. So all they're really missing to develop into beings, like a jellyfish, for instance, is touch. They need touch and social structures to become more efficient so that they can evolve. Now that probably won't happen here, but if you could imagine on another planet, with all the various probabilities of things that can happen, imagine that somewhere, a jellyfish, they didn't need to come out of the sea, and then they do all the things we've suggested, or like you're saying, an insectoid creature, because an insectoid can still be really kind of gooey on the inside, and they can do crazy things with their genetics as well. Like flies, for example, have amazing resistance to radiation. So if you're flying around the solar system in a spaceship and you're basically immune to radiation, you're laughing.
No, I completely agree. Right, last points. Shall we do this last story, or shall we do final words, because it's coming up to 11? In fact, it's past 11.
If people want to talk about it, I'm happy to talk about it, but for myself, I'm not really wanting to.
Yeah, final word. That's not a problem. That's 1 vote for final word. Benson?
I'm good with final words.
2 votes for final word. So, Mad Dodge, you little bitch, it's your choice.
Oh, no, just wrap it up. It's all good.
Yeah, final word. Fuck you, I wanted to do the story. Fuck you all.
Nah, you'll just need to do a video on it yourself and entertain us all tomorrow.
No, I'll be fine. I've got lots of videos that are going to be coming out, but they're going to be coming out next week, unfortunately. I do have a BBC free video coming out tomorrow, which is about veganism. So that will be interesting.
Veganism.
And the week after that, I have lots of white supremacy videos coming out. Obviously, not the application, but the absolute dissatisfaction that these people are actually pushing this type of ideology. So I have a busy schedule.
That does sound like quite the week ahead of you.
I'll be fine. I've dealt with black supremacists, so the white ones can't be any worse. Surely.
They're actually just softer targets if you think about it, really. You can socially acceptably make them look ridiculous.
I actually honestly do feel that white supremacists are softer targets, where black supremacists and black nationalists blame everything on slavery or thereof, or the systematic violation and whatever oppression of governments and everything else of that. The white supremacists think very, very similar to that, but instead of it being slavery, it's the Jews, and instead of it being society, it's the Jews. Instead of it being people that are oppressing them, it's the Jews. I mean, there's a pattern here.
Yeah, I'm sensing a pattern. I can't think what it is, though.
I have no idea. To the point where I'm giving away a little bit of a spoiler, but it will be Monday's video if I can get it fucking done. One of the white supremacists that I've found, or the white nationalist that I've found, is I won't give the name away, but is advocating for a particular senator in California. I'm sure Mad Dodge will know who I'm talking about, Mr. Little. But he's advocating for him and classifying him as a white nationalist, which is fine, do whatever. But the white nationalist is actually pandering to the black vote by saying that he's actually going to cut off funding to Israel and then use that money to pay the people of color that are direct descendants of slavery reparations. This is from a white nationalist.
Interesting.
Very, very, very interesting. Not contradictory at all or anything, but interesting.
Then again, if you're expecting any sense out of them, I mean, good luck with that. But
I'm finding it so fun. I found a couple. And I'm looking forward to trying to get them to come onto the channel to actually have a chat as well as doing videos against them. I'm actually really hoping to have a physical chat with them as well. And hopefully, at some point, I said this in the pre-chat, hopefully be able to get them to come on with other people that I've had on before. I'm thinking of African Supremacy and Reality's Temple on Earth, to be able to instigate the idea of a black nationalist talking to a white nationalist and seeing what they have similar, which is everything bar the reasons why and the race. It'll be interesting to see.
I have to be there for that one. That is going to be such an interesting stream.
That's what I'm going to push for anyway. That's what I'm going to push for. We'll see if it happens. I'm not saying it's booked because it's not. I haven't even been in contact with the other guy, the white supremacist guys or the white nationalist guys yet. So I don't know, but that's what I'm going to push for. Hopefully in the next couple of months.
Good luck to you, mate. I hope you do it. I really do.
It should be interesting. It should be funny.
Yep.
Right, Mad Dodge, as you're the low man on totem pole, as somebody we both know would normally say, you're first, mate.
Well, actually, I just want to tell you, you should look at this channel, No White Guilt. This guy you might want to tear into.
Got him.
Oh, okay. All right. Cool. You're already a step ahead. All right, nice. I have like I said earlier, my son took off to go watch fireworks with his friends, so I have nothing better to do. I'm probably going to start the Red Eye here shortly. So come on over there if anybody's bored and check it out. And that's all. That's my final words.
No worries. Thank you. Crumple Point?
Just wanted to say that it was a very interesting discussion, and I think that it's important, I think, to do these little thought experiments, because it gives you, it's one thing to be creative, but if you're creative within the bounds of let's do an alternate history, rather than just, here's a blank canvas, it leads to all these crazy ideas and, an actual better understanding of the things that are true, because you've explored the unknown in a way that you can get a grasp on. And just stuff about, like, well, maybe this sort of thinking is how we'll master things like space travel, because I'm saying, a cephalopod could survive the rigors of space, and you've got Jensen saying an insectoid can move a lot more efficiently than a humanoid, and maybe like trying out designs of suits or robots or spaceships or anything along these terms in experiments in lab conditions is how we'll master these things. And I like to do this sort of thing. I think it's a very kind of a good mental challenge. And I just love you guys' input as well, because it does. You're put out challenging ideas, and then we've got to push backward and forward until the thing breaks, and it's fun. But my neck is getting very sore from this very heavy tinfoil hat I've put on, so I will bid you all good night, and thank you to everybody who watched, and hope you enjoyed, and give these guys big love, and cheers, guys.
Thank you very much, Crumple Point. Jensen Quinn, please take it away.
No problem. Mine is a very simple message. Mine is to the aliens. Please come and invade. For fuck's sake, we are doomed without you. We need you to either wipe us out or at least get us on the right track. All yours, mate.
I would just like to point out that the views expressed on this channel are that of their own respective people, and that the views respected by Jensen Gwynn are their own, and no response to the ideas and points of the common sense guy.
Howard.
No, but as Crumple Point's already alluded to, I absolutely love doing these thought experiments. I love being able to take out the common sense of my thought process and actually be able to slip into something that takes a lot of actual understanding of the actual processes that people are going through to get to the nuances of what they want to explain. I think if we're actually able to do that for the idea of conspiracies in themselves, or I can't speak, the idea of the theories in themselves, if we're able to do that for them, then we should be able to do that from a political aspect. So when it comes to the point of being able to explore and examine the ideas of, say, aliens in themselves, yes, I know a lot of people don't believe in them. I'm one of those people that doesn't believe in the actual ideas of aliens themselves. There will be extraterrestrial life, but not in the ideas that we actually have already perpetuated in themselves. But it's the process of being able to put yourself into somebody else that thinks that, and trying to understand why they think that. Because if you can do that for the idea of something that you don't believe in, you can do that for the idea of different politics. If you can do that from an idea of different politics, you've already won. The reason why I say you've already won is because you understand where the other people are coming from. You can understand their arguments. You can understand their insight and the reasons why they're thinking the way they do. But if it comes to a point of being able to go on a moralistic idea, you can understand where their morals are coming from. Because even though maybe the morals are the same, but you just get to a different point or a different ideology set on it, the morals are still the same. They're still trying to help society, but in the best way that they know or think that they can. You have to understand that. Because we have to understand that people are not doing this to destroy humanity generally, but they're doing it to try and help humanity in the way that they see fit and understand it. And when you have that mindset, you can have a conversation with people, whether it's white nationalists, whether it's black nationalists, whether it's a Nazi, whether it's a feminist, God forbid, whether it's a fucking communist. It doesn't matter. Those mindsets are still from people that are trying to make the planet better, but in their image and in their head. So understand that, talk to them, engage them, trying to use facts and figures to back up your points. But always remember that they're still coming from those points, from their mindset of making the place better for them and for the people around them. That being said, thank you very much. I'll see you all again real soon.